Lewiston City Council will come to order. Next order of business is our Pledge of Allegiance. If you would please stand and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Council and members of the public, for being here tonight. This is our regular meeting scheduled for September 25th, 2023. Our next order of business is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the council on agenda items or other items they wish to bring to the attention of the council. Citizens are encouraged to discuss operational issues in advance with the mayor. In consideration of others wishing to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Also, the Lewiston City Council pledges to practice and promote civility within the governing body, advocating for civil engagement, respecting others and their viewpoints, and finding solutions for the betterment of the city of Lewiston. Then also, councilors, I'd like to read something to you and for the public's benefit before we take our first citizen comments. I get a lot of questions about whether or not we can ask questions of those who are presenting citizen comments, and the answer to that is yes. And so I just want to let the public know and those listening at home that we are allowed to do that. But let me just read from the city code what it says about that. City councilor questions. It says city councilors may, after obtaining the floor, ask questions of speakers during public comment. City councilors shall use restraint when exercising this option and shall attempt to limit questioning to 3 minutes. The presiding officer may intervene if a city councilor is violating the spirit of this guideline. So I just want to share with the public, we may or may not ask you questions after you present your comments. It doesn't mean that we're not listening. We appreciate you being here. But if a councilor has the need to ask you a question, councilors, you are sure allowed to do that. So with that, I will open it up for citizen comments. If you have comments to offer tonight, I would invite you to the standing microphone. Introduce yourself, state your name and your city of residence. We don't need your physical address. And remember to speak up loudly and clearly into the microphone so those listening at home can hear what you have to say. That's very important, or for us here up on the dais. So with that, I will open it up for citizen comments. If you're here for the public hearing, tonight, those will have to wait till we start the public hearing. So I should have said that before you start to stand up. Okay.
Saved him.
Okay, I will close citizen comments. And we will move on to our next order of business, agenda item 4, public hearings and related action items. First item is A, public hearing VA-02-2023, accepting testimony on a request to vacate a section of the Bryden Avenue public right-of-way, beginning at the east side of 18th Street and extending a distance of 476 feet east, with the condition that an alternate public right-of-way be dedicated in the final plat of the Canyon Crest South Addition that connects 18th Street to the remaining portion of Bryden Avenue, not vacated, in a location satisfactory to the city engineer. How this will work is I will open the public hearing. We'll have a staff presentation. After the staff presentation, the applicant provide testimony or presentation. The public then will be invited to offer their testimony if there is any. Councilors, you have the opportunity to ask questions of the staff, applicant, or persons providing testimony. However, no additional evidence or testimony may be received once the public hearing is closed. So this or that is the time to ask questions you might have. After the presentation of testimony, the applicant has the right to rebut any of that testimony, and then I will close the public hearing after that. So with that, I'm going to announce the opening of the public hearing on VA-02-2023, and I will invite our city surveyor, Mr. Wigan, if he could please open it up for us. Welcome. Thank you.
Mayor, council members, good evening. Mark Wiggins, City Surveyor, and I'm here to present the staff report for VA 02-2023. The applicant Dan Young of BK Holdings LLC has filed a petition requesting that the city vacate an approximately 476-foot long portion of Bryden Avenue right-of-way west of 18th Street. As explained in the written staff report, there have been requests of other adjacent landowners in the past to vacate portions of the Bryden Avenue right-of-way in this area. Various issues, including lack of consent from adjacent landowners, loss of possible future connections for the public transportation network, and uncertainty regarding the development plans of the vacant land to the south of Bryden Avenue have all led to these actions being unsuccessful. For this request, Mr. Young was able to secure notarized consent letters for all of the adjacent landowners. Mr. Young's proposal has also addressed concerns regarding continuation of the street network and connections to the development south of the proposed vacation by applying for approval of a preliminary plat in conjunction with his vacation request. The applicant's preliminary plat, which is also on tonight's agenda, proposes to create a new parallel street approximately 104 feet south of the existing Bryden Avenue alignment. The applicant's portion of the proposed Bryden Avenue vacation would be included in the new lots proposed to be created between the old and new lots, or old and new streets, excuse me. New street connections on the east side of the proposed subdivision would provide access to the remaining Bryden Avenue right-of-way and the continuation of the street network as described in section 3232 of code. The proposed southerly shift of the street and creation of a new lot of the new line of lots would also have the benefit of eliminating the double frontage condition of several existing lots along Clearview Point Drive, which is prohibited in section 3235C of city code. In a practical sense, if both the vacation and subdivision actions are completed, the end result is just a shift of the street 104 feet to the south. Because this proposed vacation requires the creation of an alternate street proposed to be built as part of the subdivision, this vacation should not be approved unless the preliminary plat for the subdivision is also approved. Conversely, unless this vacation is approved, the proposed preliminary plat would include property which the developer does not own, and so could not be approved. Essentially, you should consider these two actions, this vacation and the preliminary plat for the Canyon Crest South Edition that is also on the agenda tonight as a package deal. They will either need to be approved together or both denied together. Additionally, since actual completion of the required alternate road could still be many months after approval, after approval of the preliminary plat, it is recommended that the actual filing of the vacation resolution should be postponed until the developer has completed the development of the alternate street. I also need to note that the associated preliminary plat is on the consent agenda. So if the council chooses to deny the vacation request, you should also pull the preliminary plat from the consent agenda and vote to deny it as well. The Public Works Department has reviewed VA 02-2023 vacation request of Dan Young and DK Holdings and feel that the requested right-of-way vacation in conjunction with the associated plat and development proposal is beneficial to the public and will fulfill the intents of city code. If, based on the public hearing, the city council determines that no property rights will be adversely affected or damaged and that the vacation is expedient to the public good, the City of Lewiston Public Works staff recommends that the City Council vote to approve VA 02-2023 on the condition that the associated vacation resolution will not be filed for record until the applicant has dedicated an alternate public right-of-way in the final plat of the Canyon Crest South Edition that connects 18th Street to the remaining portion of Bryden Avenue not vacated in a location satisfactory to the city engineer. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wiggin. Council members, any quick questions? Councilor Spickelmeyer?
You, Mayor. You mentioned, I was just curious why it was only limited to the 470 feet and didn't continue all the way down. I think you mentioned it, but I couldn't follow why you.
At this time, the proposed street that the developer is proposing would actually tie back in with Bryden Avenue to complete that transportation corridor. If we were to just take out one piece or even clear across here, then we would leave 19th Street unattached to anything. There'd be a dead end here. We do have city sewer mains in both Bryden Avenue, a stretching here and all the way along 19th Street here, which are required for, that's the one in 19th Street is actually that East Orchard sewer main. So we do have to maintain access to those, and our city code also requires that the transportation corridors be preserved. This was dedicated almost 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago now, with the idea that eventually it will get built out. We do now know what the proposal is for this, so we can, look at this option for doing this, and this does look reasonable. From here on, we don't know what's going to happen over here, and so we have to leave these avenues for possible access open for the future.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark, I don't see any further questions at this time. Is the applicant here to present testimony or presentation? Applicant or his representative? No? Okay. All right, I would invite any testimony from the public. Again, if you're here to testify, please state your name and your city of residence. We do not need your physical address, and also to speak up clearly, loudly into the microphone so those listening at home can hear what you have to say. Are there any citizen comments or public testimony?
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? My name is Peter Volk. I am the attorney for Brian Steele, and I live in Viola, Idaho. And I am here speaking on behalf of Brian in opposition of the development. The main complaint really is just to focus on the ordinance of the city and the prohibition in the city's own code to not have a primary arterial right-of-way on the backyards of many of the houses that are left on Bryden Avenue. And I would encourage the council to take this opportunity to fix what had been done wrong in the past and find another way to continue to have access to those public utilities that are, I've just learned, are buried there with some other form of easement, utility easement, et cetera, as compared to having them in a right-of-way that's potentially endangering those families that are backed up to it when their children are playing in the backyards, et cetera. I think there are a number of other people here tonight who share that opinion, and hopefully the city council can find a way to deny this and provide an opportunity for further engineering and thought around this that will fix the entire problem along Bryden rather than jumping to this one opportunity. Are there any questions?
Councilors?
Okay, thank you very
I
much.
don't see any questions right now. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Jake Cahill. I am currently building a house that butts up against Bryden. It's basically right where it says Bryden Avenue to the south. Mark mentioned earlier that there is utilities back there that there needs to be maintained access to. When I did my plat, there's an easement, a 15-foot easement. I'm putting in a gravel road back to those utilities. So there is access if this is vacated all the way through. And so I oppose partial vacation of this. My backyard will also butt up against this Bryden right away. And I'm for vacating all of it or none of it. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Councilors, questions?
Excuse me, I want to make sure I heard it. You said vacate all of it or none of it?
That's my opinion of it. Yes, I would like to see it.
And why do you say that?
Because it makes no sense the way it's rerouted. My backyard is up against there's no reason for it to come through there. There's just no purpose to it. So I just don't agree with vacating part of it and having a odd street go back into that right of way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Judd Taylor. I'm from Lewiston. I kind of started this about 8 years ago when I first bought my house, realizing that Bryden was back there. Trying to learn what the vacation process was. Did realize that, like the first speaker said, we needed 100% participation. I was short 2 people to submit my application for vacation or possible vacation. Dustin then told, I got a hold of Dustin. He got a hold of the city attorney. State law is different than our city law. It's less, it's majority. They were going to work on changing that. They allowed me to submit my petition, pay the almost $500 to, go through all the different committees and whatnot. And I just want to say that every one of them, the staff response, city surveyor, the proposed vacation would correct the existing nonconformance to city code section 3235. Public works, city planner, I take no issue of the possibility of vacating this stretch of right of way because Clearwater Drive is, or Clearview Point Drive is so close to it that we need to meet the subdivision code standard of 900-foot max block. And it goes on to the city code that it's single-family residence lots extending through the block and having frontage roads on 2 parallel streets shall not be permitted. Reversing frontage shall be prohibited except where expressly permitted in accordance to sections 3232 of this chapter. So, I mean, I'd like to ask you guys, would any of you guys like to have a 60-foot road on the front of your house and a 60-foot road in the back of your house? And like the attorney said, we also have, if you look, there's the one road that comes straight off of Airway, right to the middle of my backyard. What's going to stop some 16, 17-year-old screaming down there 80 miles an hour, breaking through my fence and running my kids over? So I'm in the same boat. You either vacate it all or vacate none of it. I think there needs to be more, some more thought in it, is what I think. Any questions?
Thank you, councilors. I think we're good right now. Thank you.
Here, can
Councilor Schroeder?
I, not of the audience, but can we put on the display page 59 of 130? Because is that what it's going to look like? Can you put that page 59 up there instead of that one, Mark?
So this is basically superimposed all of the bottom lines, all of the cyan lines for our right of way and everything is existing. The red is the proposed subdivision in here, and the yellow is the area of the proposed vacation. And you can kind of see that halfway lap over where the proposed subdivision would replat the lower half. The northern half would go to the adjacent landowners.
But can we have Aaron or someone put up the slide 59, because it shows it in yellow where you can see it. And I don't know why I know I looked at that one until I found this one. I didn't understand what was going on.
I guess I'm not sure which. I do have the entire.
It's Canyon Crest South Edition is what it's on, but it's page 59.
So that
There's one in color. It's actual GIS or whatever, it's real picture. Not a drawing, but it has lines in it that indicate,
That one?
nope, that's the same one you had.
See that?
It's clear, like I said, page 59.
Oh, I think
Well,
that
and
it's
see,
because it's on
I
the,
don't have, I mean, I guess Aaron might be able to bring up the actual
Okay, well, if you
Full
can't do it, I'm sorry.
report. I don't have that with me. These are the things that I. That's not.
Well, it's page 59. It says Canyon Crest South Edition on it. And I just want to know if that's what it's,
That's, I think is the proposed plat that you're.
that's what I'm wondering, but why are we looking at this other one that doesn't really show us that?
it's under the preliminary Canyon Crest South Edition.
That's essentially the same.
Yeah, just blow it up.
Trying to remember where that came from.
But it makes more sense when you look at that.
Like the next one coming up.
Yeah, well, I know.
I sent the picture to Aaron, so maybe he can just do it.
There we go. That's
He
it.
found it. All right, so that
Thank
was,
you.
Aaron found that one. So, which is actually the same line work as the other one you were seeing. It's just, it's in yellow instead of red.
And we couldn't see it in the red.
So, Mark, though, can you if we were to approve, there's still not an alternate right-of-way drawn in,
The
correct?
alternate right-of-way is this road and
And then it goes
this
out.
road and then back into Bryden Canyon. This area would be the vacated portion.
Can you do the road again?
The road is here, center line to here and up to here, and then this is existing right of way, so it wouldn't technically be part of the plat. It would be part of what we call frontage improvements. He'd have to, this is existing right of way, so he'd have to do the improvements in the existing right of way, but this would be newly dedicated road from here across to here. Everything in these first two ranks of lots would be in the first phase by their proposal. So everything north of this line would be in that first phase, and so this T, everything up to the existing piece of Bryden would all be in that first phase. Wouldn't be until this was constructed that then we would actually file the vacation should you choose to approve it tonight.
Counselor Schroeder?
Thank you. And Mark, what would happen in that vacated area between the yellow and then the light blue line above it?
That would all, technically, it's all vacated, but that would then go to the adjacent landowners to the north.
So it would
The
become-
part that's inside the line would become the ownership of DK Holdings, and so they would include it in the plat. Everything else would go to the adjacent landowners to the north, based on
To the north.
basically extensions of their existing lot lines.
Thank you.
Oh. You need to go to the microphone if you're going to speak up.
Thanks,
Please.
Mark. I do appreciate it. Sorry for the trouble.
Yeah, and please state your name again for the record, loud and clear, so we can record all
Judd
this.
Taylor, Lewiston. So if you look, now these people here that are they're getting 30 feet of extra property for free. That's increasing the value of their house. If this is not vacated, that's going to decrease every one of these houses' values, because you're going to have a 60-foot road that could possibly go in there, and there's a drop-off right there that road can't go through. It's like a 19-foot drop-off to 19th Street. If this, this is already subdivided here, or excuse me, right here, he has his road coming in here. If this little piece here, which is like a little over 6 acres, could use 19th as an access. I mean, would you want to drive out of your driveway down here this way to get home, or to go home or go to work?
you know? I mean, that's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank-
Okay, so my name's Doug Lind. I actually live across the fence from the new house that's being built over there, my neighbor. And like Judd said, it doesn't make any sense to put a road in there because it really isn't usable at the end of it anyway. And none of us would like to have a road right back of our fence. And it certainly doesn't make sense for the other people that are building on the other side. So we would respectfully request that the council extend and vacate the entire section of the Bryden Avenue. Not really, you know, I don't care about the extra property. I just don't want a road going down that way. And it just is not common sense to put a road there. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So I guess in that sense, I'm opposed to the vacation as it's presented tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Gary Smith, Lewiston. We live in the section there that is,
Can I get you to step up to the microphone just a little bit? Yeah, the folks at home are not going to be able to hear you.
we live in the section that is proposed for abandonment right now. And as you can see, if they built that 60-foot road in back of us, we got a 60-foot road in front of us, we'd be boxed in there like rats. We have a swimming pool in our backyard. We don't want people in our backyard, you know, and we were one of the first homes that went in that new addition. And there's an old fence line runs through there. Probably 100-year-old fence. I mean, it's old. And so to control the weeds, most of those people in that first section that you were asking for abandonment have gone into that area and cleaned it up and planted trees and made grass areas. Some of them have sprinkler systems out there. And for us, it's a green area. And it would be a buffer zone between one neighborhood and the other. You know, it's a green area. Birds like green, the squirrels, you know, it's something we'd like to have, and I think it's important. And as you can see, just by looking at that picture, that big old street in front of our house, and then another one right behind our fence, I don't think anybody would like that. And so I've said my piece. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Counselors?
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Oh, yes, I'm Les Lowry, Lewiston, and I live right up there on where Bryden's gonna go through, if it does. And it'll take away my backyard, or a good share of it. Now, when the grandkids come over, it's not gonna be very good. You had to watch them real close so they don't get out in the road. So I do not want it. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Questions, counselors? Counselor Towsley?
I'm kind of curious, not for you, sir, just I'm kind of curious why this wasn't presented as a vacation of the entire section, or is it not owned? And I'm not sure why we aren't seeing this as a whole stretch to be vacated.
So this was, when this was discussed at staff level.
Mr. Wiggin, I need you to introduce yourself for the record.
Excuse me,
again,
Mark
please.
Wiggin,
Thank
City
you.
Surveyor. When this was discussed at staff level, Bryden Avenue is obviously one of the major streets in town. In our code, it specifically says we have to provide for the continuation of the existing road network. So part of this is code. Code requires that we do this. We can't just vacate a street and leave it, you know, leave dead ends, especially on 19th, that type of thing. Also, there are requirements in the subdivision code that require connections to adjacent unplatted land. So there's a couple of reasons why code says we're not supposed to do that. So what we're doing is we're following code as it was prescribed by previous city councils.
I see. Thank you.
Mark, excuse,
Counselor Schroeder?
one more question of you. As Bryden Avenue goes over to the, looking at the west, and it goes down on 19th, is that correct?
On the east is 19th, on the west is 18th.
Okay, so I'm backwards.
Okay.
But is that a smooth transition to go from Bryden down onto 19th, or is that an issue there?
Currently, there has been a partial hammerhead turnaround kind of dug in there. And so there is a little bit of a vertical in it. It's nothing that engineering couldn't overcome. But that is another one of the kind of the considerations to this is one of the reasons why we don't allow for those types of areas to be cut off like that is because of the requirements for secondary access for fire. So that turnaround at this point is probably not legal for fire access. So if we did do any kind of a vacation of Bryden Avenue, we'd also have to get another dedication of enough property in there to create a legal fire turnaround, some sort of a cul-de-sac, a larger hammerhead, those types of things. And so, I mean, that's when we're working with one developer who has access to one property and another developer is the one that would end up having to dedicate additional property for the streets, it makes getting those things together pretty difficult. So what we're doing is we're doing the best we can. The developer is doing the best they can with the situation we have at hand.
So will that hammerhead kind of thing that you were talking about going from Bryden to 19th, would that be fixed in this process?
At this point, no, because that area is not being developed. So at this point, the use of that is not actually for fire at this point because no houses are actually developed along that portion of 19th. But if it ever was, there has been some discussions of using 19th, that type of thing. If it was ever used for access in there to any kind of development, it would have to be. At this point, the end of the T intersection, what they're wanting to call Gallatin Drive, that T intersection there would be considered if they had to. I mean, obviously you've got a through street and this distance is not far enough that you'd have to do any kind of a turnaround on that because of the short distance. Fire code wouldn't require it for that short of a distance just to protect this one house. So everything as he's proposed is legal. But if we were to go any further or do any additional vacations for additional development in the future, then there would have to be changes.
So until the other portion is developed, then 19th will not be developed. Is that correct?
Nothing beyond what it is right now.
Okay. All right, so you did answer the fire question for me. So this provides for that fire backup by having all the
For what is currently being proposed, yes, it meets fire code for both in the single phase and as the full build out of the subdivision, correct?
Thank you. I think that's all from me.
Counselor Lidke?
Okay, so first of all, where does Bryden end now? Because it's not on any of these maps.
Completely off the map at this point. So,
Okay, so can we go back to your reference to statute about how we have to extend? So when we talk about Bryden, we have to take it all the way through there in some form or fashion. Is that how I'm understanding your statement?
at this point, because it's been dedicated and has been laid out, then the public has the right to that, and we have the opportunity to provide that access. For the city to give that away and cause problems in the future would be considered bad planning practice. At the moment, there is a considerable portion of Bryden Avenue that as of yet has not been built. And there are developers who are looking at parts of it, but it's, something for the future.
So is it common practice to run a street where we're gonna have that dip? To me, that looks like Pullman, like
Yeah.
where we afterthought build a street. So
Once again,
there's no
this
other
is-
alternatives, I guess is my question.
The alternative is to build it in its existing location. So
So there's this choice or the existing choice. There's no other option.
other than cutting off access to that area, pretty much, yeah. At this point, as one of the people was saying, we have, in this area, we have existing subdivisions where we've got development of houses in this area. So to actually run this street straight through probably isn't going to happen. Right now, this street is substandard. It's a 20-foot, it's one of those, essentially airway is an alley. It's a 20-foot right of way. And to then provide secondary access for any of this area, should it get developed, and even some of this area, it becomes, problematic. This developer is proposing to actually dedicate an additional 17 feet on the north side, so he is going to widen this out. So that will help with this section. But still, we've got a large area of undeveloped property back here that if we just get rid of the property, we won't have any options in the future.
So in the part with nothing is actually something right now already being developed.
There's actually, this aerial photo is a little older, so this section right here is a subdivision that went through the city council about 2 years ago, year and a half ago. It's 3 flag lots that do access off of Airway. There's currently a house going in right here. Well, and the second one would be somewhere down here on the second lot then.
Thank you, Mr. Wigan. Yes,
Thank you.
we have somebody else coming up first. Welcome.
My name is Lori Glassbell. I live in Lewiston, and I'm that property right to the east of that subdivision. And I think you're creating a back alley. We're going to build a house to the north of the existing house there, and that's going to be our back fence. So you're going to have back fences to, an alley. That's what you're creating, is a back alley throughout that whole stretch of Brighton. You're zigzagging into Brighton. You're just not being consistent with what you're talking about creating. Airway makes more sense to widen if you were going to create access and a road, because all the houses face that street. None of the houses will face that new proposed Brighton. So I really think, it's going to be hard to keep up from our standpoint. We're going to have a back fence to that road, and we're going to have weeds growing up wherever, it's not accessing anything. You're saying this all based on future growth, but you're pushing it down the hill. For fire protection, you're moving it down to the end of this proposed Brighton, when that subdivision should be handling fire protection, not pushing it down to a property owner that hasn't even developed his property. I can't support this vacation in partial. I think it needs to be the whole road. We talk about Brighton being grandfathered in and being there, and I totally understand that, but you're just making it such a convoluted thing that I don't think you can call it Brighton. Everywhere else I drive on Brighton, it's not going to look like this. So to create this, I think is really wrong. So anyway, any questions?
Counselors, questions? Boy, I get a little ringing going on here tonight.
Thank you.
Judd Taylor, Lewiston. I mean, like you were asking about Brighton. Everybody knows Brighton. It goes clear from Fifth, clear out to Thane. Okay, if you go from right here across this farm field to right over here, there's a canyon right there. Brighton's not going to go through there. It'll never connect all the way through. It won't be a straight stretch clear to Fifth Street because that canyon is too big. And right here, you have Lindsay Creek. So the cohesion is not there. It's,
breaking it off, going down here, going up here. It makes no sense, you know, so.
Once again, thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilors, any questions?
Oh,
Councilor Schroeder?
well, no, if he's up there, please go. I was just gonna bring Mark back.
Derek Bruce, Lewiston. So I live right here in this house right here. So when they put in the sewer in the 19th, they did put that little T in there, but that T is probably 8 foot deep. And the only vehicles that go down that are city trucks to go clean out the sewer. There is a sewer that is right there, and so they can access here. They made this a little bit bigger when they did it, so that truck can back in and go out. I've seen a city truck go in there twice over the last, since they put that in. The other piece of it, this right here is another access to utilities. There's a sewer main right there that the city has access to go down there. As Mr. Cahill proposed, they also have access right here. It makes no sense to put in the back portion of this section. If you vacate everything, it gives me as a homeowner that has little kids the opportunity not to have people, you know, speeding by your house. This road's going to go nowhere. So what's going to end up happening is if they don't vacate it and you try to put future development in there and this road goes here, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to stop right here. You're going to have to make a hard right-hand corner to even go anywhere. Fire access, I have a fire hydrant right here on my portion of it. So this side of the road is covered. So if any development ever went in here, as they stated, sewer would have to go this way, which it slopes downhill. So it makes sense for the sewer to go that way. And then fire would be put inside of the development there. There would be no requirement for fire access on this back portion of it here. So, any questions?
Thank you. Councilors?
Thank you.
Oh, Councilor Schroeder?
Like Mark to come back up again. Sorry, Mark, I thought I was through, but I'm not. It doesn't really sound like Bryden Avenue, even if we did this, would only be 2 blocks long here.
We actually have a developer right now that is looking at possibly, an engineer that has told us that there is the possibility of doing that fill across Bryden. So, I mean, it's not in the next, 10 years, 20 years, maybe not. Sometime way out in the future, quite possible. I mean, if the land values are high enough, anything is possible. What this basically boils down to is the second we give away as public, as representatives of the public, that property belongs to the public and we have the right to use it for access. If we as representatives of the public give it away, then we've lost that right forever. So if it ever does come to a time when it is proper to have that vacated, when we see what's going to actually happen with that land to the south, we can vacate it at that time. We would we would have control over that as representatives of the city and the public. To do it now when we don't know what's going to happen, like I said, is kind of bad planning practice, which is why the codes were written that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mark, sorry.
Councilor Litkey, Mr.
apologize,
Wigan, I
Mark.
think
You might
Councilor
just
Litkey
stay
may
up
have a
there.
question for you.
I just stay standing.
So we keep referencing code and we wrote the code but is statute, what's the difference? Ours is stricter, I heard it referenced to, correct?
That was a discussion on the requirements for the vacation process, which in that case, there's some technicalities about how the property was, or how the right-of-way was dedicated. And based on how it's dedicated, there was differences in state code as to possibilities of vacating it with different requirements. One of the requirements that was required for that partial vacation or, you know, if you only had a majority of the landowners, was that it was never used by the public. And we actually have aerial photos that show wheel tracks through that section of right of way. So that actually, that piece of code, state code, didn't apply. So, I mean, from city code, as far as vacation goes, you have to have 100% consent from adjoining landowners. But like I said, that's, you know, that's kind of a little bit of a separate issue from what we're discussing right now, because he does have 100% consent from these landowners.
Well, I need a history lesson. So if there's development over on the other side, which would be nice to have seen in this picture, because I wasn't gathering that from what I was.
And like I
necessarily
said,
reading.
it's not, you know, it's nothing that we have an actual submittal of a plat yet. So, you know, it's just things we're talking to developers about.
Right. But there's 2 houses being built.
Oh, you're talking about the
Right.
Cahill edition.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes,
So
there
there's
is
2
a
houses.
3-lot subdivision in there.
And that went through the city council 2 years ago. What was the discussion in regards to Brighton? And again, I feel like we're working backwards. I don't really understand why.
At that time, that developer was required to sign a postponement, which basically means if the road is ever, because when a property, an undeveloped property is developed, any frontage has to satisfy frontage improvements. So if you're on a vacant lot, it doesn't have curb, gutter, and sidewalk in front of it, they have to build that. Because he actually had 2 frontages, he had some on Airway, some on Brighton. The Airway, he did satisfy by construction of curb and gutter along there. Because it's so narrow, there's no room for sidewalk. On the north end, he actually had to sign a postponement agreement, which says if it's ever constructed, whatever, the owner of the property will be responsible for those improvements at that time. So it was addressed by that postponement.
So let's say we're just building Brighton, which new road in the town seems little, maybe we should fix the other ones and then we build this one, right? Sorry. If we did that, is there does it have to have the same structure as the rest of Brighton? Could we demand traffic calming so that kids or old people, whoever likes to drive fast, what are the protections we can put in place? Because if we have to follow code and statute, what are we gonna do? Because I hear what they're saying and I wouldn't like it. And to me, it does look strange to have, I'm trying to think of another area where you have a road that goes, I still don't really understand where Brighton's gonna go once we get to the end of that. Even the blue line doesn't attach to anything, so where's that going? So what are we doing to facilitate that as far as safety if we did build as it's presented?
So future construction of any streets has to adhere to one of our standard cross sections in town based on the level of service, how many cars we expect it to be will determine, you know, how wide it is, what types of curb gutter, sidewalk, those types of things that are put in there. The area right in front of this proposed development on 18th Street, they are proposing what are called traffic calming with bump outs for that to slow traffic down on this one. So that would be perfectly acceptable if we had a proposal from a design engineer that incorporated those. So that is possible. Once again, you know, looking into the crystal ball, it could be a long ways out there, but I mean, those types of things definitely could be considered. From the standpoint of this situation, it really probably shouldn't have happened. It was something that was made, decisions that were made by city councils, developers, whatever in the past, that it probably shouldn't have happened. And so we're here dealing with trying to figure out what the best way to make this happen. They should have made those earlier developers build Brighton at that time and just put houses on one side of it instead of doing the Clear Viewpoint Drive so that they could build houses on both sides. But those decisions were made then, and we have to deal with the ramifications of it.
Councilor Chowdhury?
Yeah, Mark, do you see where Brighton connects with 19th? Do you see that continuing east at some point?
once again, it's hard to look into the crystal ball and see what could happen. There is a very large
that looks like a
vertical there.
canyon, right?
I doubt that it would continue to the east. It could very
Sure.
possibly continue to the south with
So
19th.
that distance from the end, from 19th, where it dead ends at Bryden, to 18th, that's basically a city block, right? So it would shorten Bryden by a block?
Yes, but probably the bigger consideration is it cuts off the ties to 19th, which then goes down and ties back into the streets to the south. It's all about the, the network. So if we were to do that, then we're intentionally cutting off access to unplowed property there.
So,
Counselor Towesley, are you done?
Yes, I'm done, thank you.
Counselor Lidkey?
so the first street that we're talking about that we would vacate and then tee it on up, by code or statute, does that have to be Bryden? Could you drop down to the next one down and make that Bryden and come up
As it sits right
or
now,
go across?
the developer is not proposing to even call that Bryden technically. He's proposing to call it Gallatin Way. So there would be an east-west road, a north-south road. It's more just the connections, the network, so that we continue to have that ability to get traffic through there, emergency responders, even just secondary access. One of the biggest things for the fire code is the fact that you can only put a certain number of houses on a single access area. Before then, you have to have secondary access or it becomes illegal. And so this is another one of the considerations of having this other right-of-way back there to provide secondary access. But once again, it may never get built, it may get vacated in the future, but to give it up now is not advisable.
Counselor Schroeder?
Thank you. Mark, how did it come to have those houses on 18th that are on Bryden Avenue, that we call that Bryden Avenue? How come they got all that center line? Why didn't we shove all that down further or not have it in there and leave Bryden alone instead of bumping those properties into Bryden Avenue? I'm probably not making.
You're talking about the proposed new lots in yellow?
Yes.
Once again, this is trying to make the best out of a bad situation. As we've discussed, having double fronted lots, having lots with streets on two sides is not something we like to do. In this area, we can get away from that by putting a second row of lots behind them and vacating that piece of the street. But we can't do that all the way across because there are lots in there that are already developed that would not allow for that, realignment of the street. So once again, we're doing the best we can with what the situation is that has been presented to us.
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
would this not look, with this, once it's completed, will it not look the similar as the 18th Street? And then there's houses in that center line that have both roads on either side. What is the difference between that, how that's developed, to what we're proposing right now? So if you can see right on the other side of Clearview, those houses, there's two roads. There's basically, they're like in an island.
In that case, that is actually an alley. That's an unnamed alley for what they call rear loading of the garages. So it is a right of way. It is a public right of way, but it's an alley that's not a street. They're not addressed off of it, those types of things. It's another practice that was more common in the past is becoming less common now to have alleys for access to the backs of buildings, that type of thing.
Okay.
And those are paved alleys, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Counselor Spiegelmeier?
Thank you, Mayor. So Mark, if the whole piece of Bryden was vacated, did you say that then the existing plot design would have to be changed because of to allow for the fire safety, the turnarounds and stuff like, is that what you said?
The The existing design would not. You would have to make considerations for it with any future designs. As it stands, if you choose not to approve this vacation, this preliminary plat is not valid because it does incorporate parts of the vacated street. So that would have to go back to the drawing board if you choose not to approve this vacation as it stands.
Mayor.
Counselor Forsman?
Okay, and we may have went over this, but we can't move basically the whole plot up, like move the houses so the houses are closer back to housing and allowing more room for airway to become wider.
Essentially what the developer is proposing would be, the houses would be back to back in the section that's being vacated, because his lots would then go to the old center line of the road, and the lots to the north would then be vacated property to them. And so in that area, that's kind of essentially what's happening, is those houses would be back to back along that section. As far as widening airway, you'd end up having to take out houses in, or at least a house in that Cahill addition to get that to, well, I don't know. There's a lot of, once again, you're talking about the rights of several property owners that you're having to deal with, go out, get dedications from several of the landowners to do that. And basically in the city at this time, as was kind of inferred, the city does not build streets. It's all development driven. So the developers build streets. In this case, the developer wants to develop this property with some lots, and we're working through it, trying to find the best solution we can to allow him to develop this property.
Counselor Schroeder?
Thank you. Going back to the codes that want us to continuation, which I don't like all this chopped up that happened out there before we got our codes in place. So I am a proponent of our codes. Is this a state code or is this a city code?
At this point, the codes we're discussing are city codes. They are ones that were, put in place by previous city councils. If you choose to break those codes or whatever, that's up to the city council to do that.
Counselor Forsman?
Just to go back one more time on that point, you discussed that, though, if we got rid of the code, then that would then get rid of that land, and we would basically give it up, and then we would not own that anymore.
Yeah, correct. The vacation would basically, if we went through and vacated that section of property, we would lose any control over, access to any of that in the future. And that is something that the council can do. Like I said, that was those alleys, those streets were dedicated 100 years ago with that general network just to provide for the public, and so then we would be giving up the public's rights in those streets in doing that.
Right, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wigan. Okay.
Like he said, when Clearview Point.
Jeff, please give your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Judd Taylor, Lewiston. When this subdivision was put in, and Bryden was here, he wanted, they want to, if the developer has to pay for the street, they want to be able to put a house on each side to divide that cost. Well, what Dan or DK Holdings, he doesn't want to put this in because he runs into the same problem. He's only going to access, if he has to put this portion of Bryden in, then it's only accessing one side of the street. So that full street that he would have to put in up to here would cost him that much more. So, I mean, it really, the problem started right here. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, now it's up to you to fix it and not have this jog and all this fire access that I'm hearing. this is a huge drop off. This goes down, I mean, you're talking, it's like this. It's Lindsay Creek. If you guys have it drops off, it's, hundreds of feet. It's not going anywhere. And 19th is right there. And you could widen Airway. You would probably have to take a little bit away from a couple people, but there's also 19th there. But that's the problem. He wants to build this street so he can divide the cost between both sides, the houses on both sides of the street. This was the original problem right here. But now by not vacating it, you're not fixing anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Is there further public testimony?
Gary Smith, Lewiston. If I run this. Like Judd says, this is a canyon here. I know everybody likes Bryden, it's one of your main streets through town. But in all actuality, it's not going to be a thoroughfare all the way through town because there's a canyon here and right over here, there's a canyon. So this is going to be a dead end right there too. So you're building a street that's going to have a dead end both sides no matter what. And the other thing, I'm going to say it again, if that street goes in there, it boxes us in. That street, that's our swimming pool right there. It's about 8 feet off the edge of that road. And I don't want traffic roaring up and down the street right in my backyard. We have a fence here, but all these people down through here, they don't even have a fence. So traffic's going to be right in their yard. And I haven't been down and looked at these people's homes here, but you can see how close that's cutting into their house. So somebody made a mistake in the past and allowed this to go in way too tight, looks to me like, but I'm just wanted to make sure everybody knew that there's a canyon right over here too. So canyon here, canyon right there. So you're just going to have a short piece of Bryden and you're not going to build a bridge across those and have Bryden rush across town.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have a question.
Councilor Ledke?
Who is the subdivision committee that is referenced in City Code Section 3235B and 3232F?
It's made up of several individuals. I'm on it, obviously. There's representatives of community development, fire department, our development engineer. There is representatives from the utility companies as they may serve the areas. So if we're in Lewiston Orchards Irrigation District, Barney Metz, the manager up there, is on it. It's basically any of the people that would be reviewing the plats for compliance and approvals of any of the construction of the plats.
So I guess that's my issue with the code and has been, is that for me, this leaves a lot of subjectivity. That committee's gonna change over time, just like the city council. So I've had more questions after you spoke. My original questions were, who is this committee and why aren't there just, this is how it has to go. And I get that it has to change because of not knowing what 10 to 15 years, but realistically, over the last 50, I haven't seen anybody put in a bridge over a canyon. I haven't seen, development. And I think we're walking ourselves into a whole nother issue. And again, buyer beware, just gonna say it. Should have been questions asked, but obviously there was decisions made that we need to be involved in. But I feel like this code really doesn't point us. I mean, 3235C says single-family residential lots extending through the block and having frontage on 2 parallel streets shall not be permitted. Reverse frontage shall be prohibited except where expressly permitted in accordance with subsection 3232F of this chapter, or where justified in the opinion of the subdivision committee. If you go to 3232F, it says, if a proposed subdivision abuts or contains an existing or proposed arterial route, the subdivision committee may recommend and the commission may require marginal access streets or reverse frontage with access control along the arterial route, or such other treatment as may be justified for protection of abutting properties from the nuisance and hazard of high volume traffic. For me, that code doesn't write it. It's not written in a way we can hold anybody accountable to the decisions made moving forward, because we may do it, we may not, and based on what? And there's like zero criteria that leads me up to it. So I'm having a really hard time. I had a hard time with this from the get-go, but I think I'm even more, yeah. I don't feel qualified to make the decision, I can tell you that, because I don't have any straight reference to go off of and say, here's the answer I have to go with. And so I'm struggling, but if you can help me, I'd greatly appreciate it.
I suppose one thing to consider in that is the things you were reading there were from the subdivision code, which is proposing creation of new streets. Whereas in this case, it seems like the biggest point of contention here is a street that is already dedicated to the public. The public already has rights to it, and now we're considering giving it away. So there's kind of two considerations there.
But, okay, so did I misread the code that was referenced in the report then?
It's not misreading, there are two considerations here. From the standpoint of the plat, we have to continue those streets. So the plat that he's proposing has to adhere to the code you spoke of and continue those streets. But what the point of contention that's come up is the other adjacent landowners would like us to vacate an additional portion of street that continuation is connecting to. So we've got two issues kind of here.
Councilor Towsley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think our rejecting this is necessarily precedent by any means. And I don't like that this developer has put this on us. So if we accept this as is, then whoever goes in to develop that last piece is going to have an even bigger mess. And they're going to come to us and or whoever's going to be here, and it's going to be even harder for them to make a decision about it. And at this point, I'm willing to say no, and that you can have a developer come back and fix that. And I understand, I listen to people talking about having people drive behind their house and having people in front. I live in a property like that. In my backyard, I have a fenced yard and my grandkids are there, and it's 35 miles an hour. So I understand that. I feel your pain. It isn't a death penalty, however. And so I think this would be cleaned up if and when the rest of that area is being developed, and then we come back and talk about doing this to Bryden. And I just don't see how anything is going to, I don't see this fixing this situation. It's going to be still creating a problem for the future in that area. And, you know, we all know about canyons in this country. And the fact that this was a city, this was something that the city owned, public right. I think if we took a poll to see how many people really wanted to hang on to that little piece of ground that's stretching between those properties, I don't think many of them would really care about that. And that's why I say this is not a precedent. This is a case-by-case basis that we're doing here if we do this, if we reject it. So.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Councilor Schroeder?
Thank you. So if we do not vacate any of Brighton, right, I'm so confused anymore.
At this point, the vacation that is in front of you, the vacation application that we have received is for that section.
Section
So-
off of 18th. only.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, I
So-
guess we may want to talk to the city attorney, but my understanding is that that is all that's up for consideration at this point. If you would like to vacate all of it, I think that has to be a separate action. As it stands now, if we don't vacate that portion, then the associated plat will not work because he's proposing to plat stuff that he then won't own. So
But it doesn't fix the problem of the two frontages, is that?
it'll only fix that problem in the section that he's proposing the vacation. It won't fix it down the line where he doesn't have any ability to build, construct,
And how
develop.
critical is fixing that problem?
At this point, if you don't fix that problem and just vacate a portion of it, I don't think you're going to
No, I don't want to
necessarily.
vacate any of it. I'm saying if we
Okay.
don't vacate
Then
any of it.
if we don't vacate any of it, then in order to develop that property, the developer will need to do the frontage improvements for his side of Bryden and enough of the roadway such that you can pass 2 lanes of traffic. So he'd do curb gutter sidewalk his side and about 20 feet of asphalt so that you could pass 2 lanes of traffic along that Bryden frontage.
Cut into his profit. Okay, I think that that's kind of how I'm leaning, but thank you for all of your information.
Thank you, Mr. Wigan. Counselor, it looks like we have a comment. Welcome.
My name is Michael Dancy, Lewiston. I live right here, I believe. And if you take a look at how this is laid out here, I mean, it's a lot of houses, but it's nothing like this. And this to me looks like major congestion, all these plots. And just, it creates a problem, I think, for congestion. And I just want everyone to notice that, I guess. I choose to vacate or not at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Public testimony? Okay.
I'm really disappointed that the developer is not here.
Councilor
Agreed.
Towsley, we'll get to that. Thank you. Okay, please hold your comments. If there's no more testimony from public, Councilor, do you have a question?
Just a comment, I was disappointed that the developer was not here. Maybe some answers could have been given on their part. So,
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Councilor. We are at that time where the applicant can provide a rebuttal if the applicant is present. Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing. Thank you, councilors, and everyone in attendance tonight. We will now move on to item B, under public hearings and related action items.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, councilors, next up, we have item B, consideration of VA-02-2023, considering vacating the public right-of-way in VA-02-2023, conditioned upon the dedication of an alternate public right-of-way in the final plat of the Canyon Crest South Addition that connects 18th Street to the remaining portion of Bryden Avenue, not vacated in location satisfactory to the city engineer prior to passage. Resolution implementing the vacation. And before I entertain a motion, folks, counselors, pardon me, you do have a final staff report in your packet. And the recommendation was conditioned on a public hearing by the council determining that no property rights will be affected adversely or damaged, and that such vacations is expedient for the public good. Councilors, you now have VA-02-2023 before you.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Jennifer?
This is Jennifer Tangano, Assistant City Attorney. If the city council were inclined to deny the requested vacation petition, I would recommend that someone make a motion to direct staff to draft a resolution denying the vacation petition because the public interest would be prejudiced by the vacation. And then we would proceed further that way.
Could you repeat that, Jennifer? Make sure we all heard what you had to say, please.
Yes, the motion would state or someone would request a motion to direct staff to draft a resolution denying the vacation petition because the public interest would be prejudiced by the vacation.
Councilors, you have VA-02-2023 before you. Councilor Schroeder?
Well, I don't know exactly, I didn't retain it, but I want to make a motion to deny the vacation, VA-02-2023, and direct staff to do something. That's about as good as it gets. Are we good?
Jennifer, could you help her with the motion, please?
This is Jennifer Tangano again, Assistant City Attorney. So Councilor Schroeder, I'm understanding that your motion is to recommend denying the vacation request VA-02-2023 and direct staff to draft a resolution to that effect. And the basis for that being that it would prejudice the public interest.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Been moved by Councilor Schroeder, second by Councilor Clayburgh to deny VA-02-2023 and directing staff to draft a resolution stating that the VA-02-2023 is not in the public's interest, may adversely affect or damage the public. Your discussion? Councilor Clayburgh?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Mark on this one. In this particular instance, if we vacate this, the land's gone and we have no control over it in the future. And people can say what they want about what could happen down the road. Nobody knows what's going to happen down the road. I remember when that whole subdivision started back in probably 2006 or 2007. And look at it now, there's quite a few homes out there. There's streets all over the place. A lot can happen in a few short years. So to give up the available right-of-way we have up there right now, it could be foolish and misguided.
Councilor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. And I truly understand the property owner's conditions about having a street in the front and the
Councilors,
back.
I have to remind you that no additional evidence or public testimony may be received once the hearing's closed. So our comment should be addressing the motion whether to approve or deny the vacation. Please.
Okay, all passed.
I think the motion down here. Councilor Schroeder?
Okay, thank you. The reasoning behind my denying this is that I feel that it's better left a street than a partial street. It's too convoluted. And I think we need to leave the street as it is. I think that's more important than fixing the house frontages. So that is the reasoning that I am denying that.
Thank you, Counselor. If there's no further discussion, those in favor, please signify by, did you have a comment, Counselor?
I have a question of legal. If we deny it, trying to figure out, will we need to address code if, and again, not knowing what that is, the Cahill addition is built like, are we looking at two frontages that we need to address either through code? I'm
Counselor, we need to address the question. We have to be very careful that we don't introduce any new evidence or testimony at this time. I know that's not fun for me to say that, but those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, counselors. We next move to the consent agenda, Roman numeral 5. And as a reminder, counselors, we were advised earlier that if VA-02-2023 failed, that we would need to pull item D from the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
I make a motion to remove item D, preliminary plant Canyon Crest South Edition from the consent agenda to the active agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been requested. Yeah, no vote on that. It'll be removed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselors, you now have on the consent agenda items A, B, and C for your consideration.
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda without item D as it stands.
Second.
It's been moved by Counselor Forsman, second by Counselor Schroeder to approve the consent agenda, less item D, preliminary plat Canyon Crest South addition. Is there discussion? Hearing none. Clerk Rocky?
Council President Lidkey,
aye.
Councilor Towsley,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Kleber,
Aye.
Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, counselors. We next move to our active agenda, Roman numeral 6, item A, Lewis Clark Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization Administration Agreement. Considering approval of an agreement between the City of Lewiston and the Lewis Clark Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization for administrative services. Counselors, what is your will?
Mayor,
Counselor Schroeder?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agreement for services between the City of Lewiston and the Lewis Clark Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Second.
Been moved by Counselor Schroeder, second by Counselor Towsley to approve the agreement for services between the City of Lewiston and the Lewis Clark Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization. Did you have a question, Counselor? No. Okay. Is there discussion? Clerk Rocky?
Council President Lidkey,
Aye.
Councilor Towsley,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman.
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Kleber,
Aye.
Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Aye.
Thank you, counselors. Next up on the active agenda, Roman numeral 6, item B, collective bargaining agreement, Fraternal Order of Police, Lewis Clark Lodge number 10. We have Director Province with us tonight to go over this, considering approval of a collective bargaining agreement with the Fraternal Order of Police, Lewis Clark Lodge number 10 for the period of October 1, 2023 through September 30, 2026. This is an action item. Welcome, Director Province. Please introduce yourself for the record and remember to speak up loudly. Clearly, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Nikki Province, HR Director for the City of Lewiston.
In your packet, you were provided with a redlined copy of the collective bargaining agreement. The red line reflects the negotiation that was conducted between the Fraternal Order of Police and the city. In front of you is a request to approve the collective bargaining agreement as well as the attached new salary schedule that was negotiated on as well. And then I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director. Councilors. Councilor Speckelmeyer.
Thank you. So Director, in here, it gave the pay schedules. I was just curious, did it follow the, what was it, a 2.5% COLA increase? Is that what it?
Yes, this does include the 2.5% COLA that was approved in the budget.
And each additional year was the same, or didn't get the verbiage of how that?
Yeah, so the 3 years of the contract, this pay scale does include the 2.5% for fiscal year 24. And then based in the contract, they have a minimum 1% to a maximum 2.5%, depending on COLA for fiscal year 25 and then 26.
Councilor
Mayor-
Litt.
Oh, sorry. Depending on COLA determined by who?
The language is in there. It's actually the same language in all collective bargaining agreements. It's based on a January to January, February to February, January, February, March. Yeah, okay. So it's based on a January to January, February to February, March look back. And so if it's higher than 2.5, they get the maximum 2.5. If it's less than 2.5, they get the minimum 1.
Councilor Forsman.
My spot's not even in red. But the 960, is that what they can accrue? They can build up that much leave and then they get paid out if they're still working, or
Their sick leave?
I think, yes, sick leave.
Yeah. So all employees can get a max, other than fire, get a max of 960 sick leave. So that builds over time in their career. And then when they go to retire, they get 35% of that put into a VIBA account to use for medical expenses and premiums. If they were to separate after 5 years, they get the 25% of their sick leave balance at their rate of pay.
Councilor Speckelmeyer.
Thank you, Mayor. So in it, and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask the question, but is this, so are we in line with our neighboring cities then? As far as our pay and our agreements and everything?
Yeah. So that was a lot of discussion between the FOP and the city to try to come up with comparables. I think we had varying opinions on that, but I think in the end, we came up with what we thought was competitive for our region.
Councilor Lidkey.
Going back to VIBA, I'm struggling with this language. So if an employee separates from the city after 5 years, meaning they're not retirement age?
Correct. They're not retiring. They're separating from the city.
Okay, so then an employee who meets PERSI retirement requirements and retires from the city after 5 complete years of service. So we're basing that off of PERSI retirement requirements. That would not change how much time they've served with the city. I'm trying to wrap my head around.
So whether it's resignation or retirement, you have to have a minimum 5 years with the city. They earn 96 hours of sick leave a year. So if an employee was to use no sick leave, it would take them over 10 years to get to the maximum 960. But this is indicating if after 5 years they separate, they get 25%. If they retire from PERSI, so they're eligible to retire, they do so, and they're retiring from the city, they get 35%.
Can you tell me when that practice began?
Well, I know the practice is currently in the personnel policy. It's been in my time here 10 years, so it was prior to at least 10 years here. I think it's actually been in place for quite a while.
So can you tell me, do people hold on to 960 hours pretty regularly at the city?
Well, we previously had a sick leave incentive where people could get up to 960 and then they would earn an additional benefit. With the new council and mayor, that sick leave incentive was removed. And so I can't tell you number-wise how many people get to 960, but it's obviously an incentive to do so that you can have that VEBA payout. It's an employer pay that's provided directly to VEBA, so the employee doesn't actually get the money. We put it into their account.
So when we say it's an incentive, follow up,
Counselor?
when we say it's an incentive, are people taking time off when they need to, when they're sick? I'm just trying to figure out what are incentivizing? Are we incentivizing people not taking care of themselves and coming to work and spreading germs, or mental health, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, that incentive, like I said, was removed when the mayor came here. And I think that was part of our conversation was, especially during COVID, we're incentivizing people to come to work, potentially sick, where we would rather you utilize the sick leave that you're being benefited. That 960 is a cap. It really depends on a person's situation in life and whether they need that sick leave or not. Should they go on a family medical leave or have a child with a condition or a spouse, they can utilize that sick leave. So somebody may not get to 960. They may leave with 200 and they would only get 25% of the 200 hours.
I'm just wondering, is it common practice that, to your knowledge, when people leave, are the majority of our staff at close to or on that high end of 9?
I couldn't answer one way or another. Honestly, we've had a number of long-term employees who retired with the city. Potentially they could have been at their max 960. Some people have only been here a couple of years and they leave, so they're not eligible for it at all. It really just depends.
Counselor Towsley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I retired through Percy, and it has a very similar program. And I was able to accumulate so many sick days, which was an incentive for me and for many of my colleagues to, sometimes you suck it up and you do it because you know that that's going to be a good thing for you in the future, but you also have it there if you need it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's an important part of the package that you put together, and I appreciate that.
I think it's a way for employees to not feel like they have to use it in order to earn some sort of benefit off of it. So if you do have employees who take little accrued leave or maybe don't have a reason to use it, they're dedicated and come to work every day. They don't need the capacity to use that sick leave. There's an advantage in the end that you would get some of that balance. That's not saying that employees should come to work sick. It's just saying that if they build their balances, they do have that benefit to look forward to when they go to retire. And that benefit is only to be used on medical, dental, vision expenses and health premiums. So it has a very limited usage of that money.
Mr. Mayor?
Counselor Towsley?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Lewis and the Fraternal Order of Police, Lewis Clark Lodge, number 10.
Second.
Been moved by Counselor Towsley, seconded by Counselor Schroeder, to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Lewiston and Fraternal Order Police, Lewis Clark Lodge, number 10. Is there further discussion?
Here.
Counselor Lidke?
Law enforcement is important to our public safety, and I want to support this agreement. I do have issue due to prior conversations regarding COLA and some, let's start with COLA. So I have worked in the private sector for all of my career. However, I worked closely with state and other other government agencies. To me, it's a civic duty that you choose to take on. And for a lot of years, I saw state employees be furloughed without pay, not receive COLAs because it's based on the economy. And historically, it looks like the city of Lewiston has stuck to this 1 to 2.5%. And I understand that with inflation and all the things that we're all dealing with, however, you are working for the government, and I think we need to, I would like to see language in all of our collective bargaining that states that we can definitely look at COLA. I don't want to take it away arbitrarily, but I want it to be based on the health of the economics of the community that you serve. And so I don't particularly like that language that handcuffs city councils to give an increase to any group. I have issue with that. And then I also, while I think VIBA is great, and I don't necessarily disagree, and I appreciate that practice for the increased incentive was removed because it wasn't in personnel policy, because I didn't see it in the actual policy. Reading through this, for me, law enforcement is often first one to the scene of, could be anything that can strike a mental health crisis. And I would have liked to have seen some incentive or something in here that addressed that, so that we're encouraging people to have a work-life balance and treat themselves so that they can respond safely and keep themselves in good working order. So I do have some issues. Obviously, as a part-time counselor, I can't come do the collective bargaining, but I do have some issues with this, on both the fact that we need to be financially responsible to our public, but also give them a workforce that is taken care of on all levels. So I do have issue. I don't know that I will vote against it, but I would like to make that known that I think we need to look at that and really base our ability to increase pay based on the health of the economics of our community. And right now, I don't see a lot of public I don't see a lot of governments taking the responsibility to say we chose this line of work to do civic duty, while private companies are holding back COLAs, while our community is not seeing those increases. So just a comment.
If I might be able to comment on that. We are working for a government, but we are also human beings. And so our employees have mortgages they pay, increased gas, increased childcare, increased everything, just like all of us. And when we look at a COLA, that 2.5% was actually quite low in comparison to a number of our competitors. And in HR, we're trying to retain our employees. We're trying to retain good working employees, which our police department does have. Especially dispatch is significantly under employed. We have a number of vacancies there that we're trying to fill. And so, I wanted to put it out there that we have really good, hardworking employees who also have to pay their bills and have to pay their mortgages. And so when we're looking at COLA, one thing that's allowed the city to do in the past is not make significant pay increases. We've been able to come along with the market and not have to make 9 or 10% pay increases. And so that's a nice thing about having that minimal COLA every year when you're looking at competitive wages within the valley.
Councilor Schroeder?
Thank you. I didn't get to spend as many hours with you on your negotiations, but I did get some in, and they were both on the city and the union. I think they were both very respectful with each other, and they worked together to come to a solution, and I was very proud to see that. So thank you very much for all the work you all did.
Merrick?
Counselor Forsman?
I'm not too fond of this 960 hours. That's a lot of hours to be built up, and I'm not sure I see the reasoning behind that. Again, I don't think I'm gonna say no to the whole contract due to that. But I feel like over 10 years that could be reevaluated. There's not a lot of jobs I know of that you could build up to 960 hours of sick leave. And as far as the 2.5 COLA, I know, like all of us, we're all struggling to pay our bills. And I don't think the intent was that we wouldn't do it at all. I think the intent was that we would base it year by year to see how we can withstand as a city and financially being smart for our citizens as well as our people that work with the city. And within any company, any smart business, and that includes the big manufacturers that are here in the valley, they look at, can they afford it and still continue to provide health insurance, pay raises for those who deserve it. And that's how they base off of it. And we're not guaranteed that increase. We get it when the company feels that they can actually afford that. And I know that's hard to look at, but I don't think the intent was just not to do it. I think the intent, again, was to look at it yearly to see how we're financially doing as a city. And when we raise as a city, then it further raises for citizens. So we need to look at that overall instead of just a one solution. But I understand that also the city employees also are feeling the hurt just as much as citizens, because you guys are citizens of the city of Lewiston, or maybe don't live in Lewiston, but everybody's feeling the hurt of the economic times that we're in right now. And I understand that, and I appreciate that you have said that.
Yeah, I just want a little clarity on the COLA. 2.5% that our employees have been receiving the last couple of years has not been the cost of living, right? It's significantly higher. So when you're putting a max on that 2.5%, it's really limiting on a lower end of what an actual cost of living is looking like. But of course, it's unaffordable to pay that 9 or 10%. So I get that, but I just wanted to make note of that it's not at inflation, it's lower than.
Counselor Lickey?
So can you just quickly explain, you've got 8 steps. Here's to clarify, I am not saying that we're giving COLA to not hardworking employees, so I want to clarify that. I'm saying that we need to be financially responsible. And so when I've looked at, and I've requested this information from the staff, and I appreciate that it was shared with me, I see this as you clarified with me that even though the policy states that steps are based on merit, so an employee has to show that they're, and I can't remember the exact term, but competent, and the justification of that needs for the policy, there should be an annual review. I'm not sure that practice has been done regularly. And so when I've looked at the increase in what we are paying our 300 plus staff, when you look at, and again, going through the steps, can we look at somebody who is topped out at step 8 to look at, I don't necessarily want those folks to not be able to receive some increase if merit allows, but when we talk about 8 or 9%, I think we get pretty close to 8 on some of these, especially if we're getting to the 2.5, because if you measure the increases over time in each step, and if they're being given to virtually every employee that's still in that step system, we're increasing our wages by quite a bit each year, and it is going to take some real critical budgeting to make sure that we can keep up with that over time, which is why when we talk about automatic COLAs, that's my issue, is can we financially do that? It's not taking something away. Again, I believe that we have many hardworking city employees that I will not be on their Christmas card list for saying these things, except I'm trying to make sure that the financial stability of this city can last their career. So when we talk about automatic, that's the problem I have with the language in these agreements. Can we discuss it every year? By golly, yes, we can. And I do think that your statement about 2.5, it certainly isn't where inflation has gone. I have yet to meet anybody in this valley that has received that sort of COLA increase. But with steps and an automatic COLA, I do think that we are sometimes getting there with quite a few of our employees. So I think my statement is simply, can we sustain this over time with continued automatic? Can we look at it? And yes, it's not going to be fun to not get that 2.5% increase, but can we look at what our policy says to say, based on merit, if you're topped out on your steps, what does that look like? Can we add that into it so that it is based on available funds and merit as to work performance? And I'm not going to apologize for feeling like that's a conservative and responsible way to look at this. So again, I support the LPD wholeheartedly. I really like the pay scale. I just have an issue with automatic and being locked in when we don't know what our economic outlook's going to be from year to year.
Yep, understandable.
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
I've read through this 28-page document, and it looks good, and I'm glad that there's everything in there that you can have as far as overtime and vacation and seniority and all that works. And I think that definitely, in order to have a effective, lively police force, we need to make sure they're not worked overtime to the max, paid a decent wage, obviously, so that they can still provide for their families. And I think well, I don't know if I can't speak for all of them, but I know there is quite a bit of police officers that usually have stay-at-home spouses to take care of their children, so they need to they're the sole provider of their home. So I'm glad that we are working with our police and that we're doing this so that they can continue to provide us unmatched protection. And I know, talking to some of the police officers, a lot of them are having to work extended amount of overtime. And so hopefully this will make us competitive, and then maybe we can get some more police officers that want to come here and be a part of our great valley. And I know that if you're not providing a great competitive wage, oftentimes people will look to other places. So I'd hate to see that we're training and spending all this time on police officers for them just to go somewhere else. So I'm glad that we went through this, and appreciate all the efforts on both sides. And this is a very detailed document, and just commend the efforts on both. And Mayor, commend the efforts. There's a lot of work, it seems, that you guys went through. So I just want to make sure I share that. I'm in full support of our police officers and making sure they're getting paid well.
Well, and I appreciate that comment. Our police are one of the more difficult jobs to recruit for. I said it earlier, dispatch, but also officer. It's very competitive amongst agencies. And so we really would like our hardworking officers in dispatch to stay and not leave for non-competitive wages.
Counselor Townsley?
Yeah, I think it's real important that we try not to blur the whole thing between civic jobs and roles and privatization, which, when we talk about things like this, I don't think anybody would be advocating for privatization of a police force. I mean, that sounds pretty horrible. And so I think sometimes you're trying to deal with apples and oranges and trying to come up with some reasoning as to why you will, A, salute the flag, shake people's hands, tell them how important you think they are, and yet, as they sit here listening to us quibble about these situational things that are up for approval right now, not in negotiation, I'm sure there's a hollow feeling that's happening there, and I'm embarrassed by that, and I'm saddened by that. And I wholeheartedly support this. And I was in bargaining when I was working as a teacher, and I know it's hard work. And sometimes you get everything you want, and sometimes you don't. Well, rarely do you get everything you want, but you come away appreciating both points of view. And if you don't, well, then there's some rancor and there's some other problems. You saw places in Michigan that have problems where they couldn't come to agreement. You saw other places where that is. This is an agreement for us to accept. I don't want to sit here and listen to quibbling about things about it, get involved in the process for the next one, and then we'll move on. Thank you for your service.
Mayor.
Let's see if there's anyone else here. Councilor Ledke?
To respond to that, and I apologize for any quibbling I might do, and maybe I'm not being clear enough. This is one of 3 collective bargaining agreements. I am simply stating at some point, this is a 3-year contract. And if we don't look at how we move forward with language in our contracts, then when it comes time to look at huge financial cuts of some kind, it comes down to, do we cut positions because we're locked in to things? I'm looking at the whole city staff. It just happens to be that this is the one in front of us that I'm having to reference the language. But I am a proponent for for us to take into consideration that automatic locked in, because what we have practiced as a city is that it goes, if we do for one, we do for all. And if we're going to continue that practice, then I think it needs to be said that this is language that I do think needs to be looked at for the protection of our finances and to be able to keep up. Because if we were locked in, it would be a question of, we have to give COLA, but we have to make hard decisions as far as the money available, which means we cut positions, and I don't want to have to go that route. So if I wasn't clear, I apologize. Again, to the police officers in this room, I'm sorry that it's your contract. I'm having to say that too. I support everything in this. I want the COLA for you this year. I don't want to be locked into it for future years without a conversation, is my statement. With that said, I'm going to support this contract because I don't want to create an issue for the FOP in the city to have to go back into negotiations.
Well, and I do just want to clarify on the COLA, it's not a guaranteed 2.5%. It's just if it's 2.5% or above, the maximum is 2.5%. So it's entirely possible that it's only 1% or 1.5%. So I just want to clarify that. I think in the past we have I think these last couple of years are anomalies, but previous to that, on average, it was 2%. So.
Councilors, we have a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Lewiston and Fraternal Order of Police, Lewis Clark Lodge number 10. Clerk Brocky, please call the roll.
Council President Lidkey.
Aye.
Councilor Towsley.
Aye.
Councilor Forsman. Aye. Councilor Schroeder.
Aye.
Councilor Kleberg.
Aye.
Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. If I could just take liberty here, are the officers going to stay with us to the end, or they need to leave? Okay, well, I guess what I'd like to do is I'm just going to put the council at ease, and I would just like to ask if the officers would like to just share a word with us before they leave. You don't have to. You took
put
the
on the
time to
spot.
be here tonight. So either that or I'll challenge you to an arm wrestling match. And I know last time you turned me down, so. I would like to at least give you the courtesy and thank you for being here tonight. Officer Storms.
Yeah, appreciate it. Joe Storms, Lodge President, FOP Lodge 10. There was several months of us negotiating with the city, regular meetings, regular communication, and we did come to an agreement. So we appreciate that. Councilor Schroeder, thank you for being at 2 of our meetings. That's all I have to say.
So I'm Will Thompson. I've been working here for about 2 years, and then previous before that, I was 5 years just north of Dallas. That's why I have an accent. So we worked on this for a long time, and it was a lot of back and forth, and it did get a little heated sometimes with disagreements and things like that. We put a lot of work into it. I know that I was crunching numbers for hours outside of work. And all the numbers that we came up with, it was just to be competitive. We weren't trying to be greedy. Honestly, we were trying to put ourselves in between Moscow and Coeur d'Alene. Just with the size of the city, the calls that we take, population, and just wanting retention, because it does cost a lot of money to put an officer through the academy, and then all the training, the gear, things like that. And when an officer leaves, it's, that money's kind of gone. So I do appreciate the support, appreciate you, Mayor, and all the meetings and doing the hard work in order to get this done. And it's going to help out officers tremendously. We do have single parents as officers that do struggle with mortgages, rents, taking care of kids. Not all our officers are married or, and there are some officers that are the single earner. So it's going to help us out a lot. Yeah, we understand the burden it may put down the road as far as money is concerned, and we just want to make sure that our officers are taken care of and that we can have good retention in the future. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, councilors, next we'll move on to item C, Modi Park Memorandum of Understanding, considering approval of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Lewiston and Modi Park Conservancy, Inc., regarding the development, maintenance, and operation of the Ruth Rowell Modi Wildlife Park. This is an action item, and councilors, you have this item before you.
Mayor?
Councilor Forsman?
Sorry. Motion to approve the memorandum, I'm getting tired, of understanding between the City of Lewiston and Modi Park Conservancy.
It's been moved by Councilor Forsman, second by Councilor Schroeder, to approve the memorandum of understanding between the City of Lewiston and Modi Park Conservancy Incorporated. Is there discussion?
Mayor?
Councilor Forsman?
Just going to speak to motion. Not that it's necessary, it may or may not be, but I go to the Parks and Recs meetings, so I get to know a lot about these people, and they actually came to one of our meetings. And they are dedicated to making sure that this is access to the public, as well as having it near their homes, some of that live near the area, and continuing to honor the person that used to own the Ruth Rowell Modi Wildlife Park. So I believe it's Ruth was her name, our family that owned it, and they wanting to keep to that. So I'm an effort of continuing to work with this group. They're hardworking, dedicated, and I think it would be a disservice to not be in cahoots with them and make sure we're working with them and seeing that we make that area even better for, I know that kids go there for school things. I think they have some, what do we call that? They farm it. I'm not trying to think what school does that, but they take some schools there that do some kind of farming on there, gardening type stuff. So it's a very important piece to our community, and hopefully it even gets out there more so.
Thank you, Counselor. For further discussion? Clerk Brocky?
Council President Lidkey,
Aye.
Counselor Chowsley,
Aye.
Counselor Forsman,
Aye.
Counselor Schroeder,
Aye.
Counselor Spiegelmeier.
Aye. Thank you, Counselors. Motion passes. Next, we move to item D, ordinances. Number 1, first reading. Item A, ordinance 4845, considering amending various sections in Lewiston City Code, Chapter 24, related to general provisions under Article 1, noise control and regulation under Article 2, repealing and reserving Article 3 related to off-road vehicles, and graffiti abatement under Article 4. This is an action item, and we have Captain Clone with us tonight. Captain Clone, welcome. Please introduce yourself. For the record, remember to speak up loudly and clearly. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Jeff Clone, Captain Lewiston Police Department. This ordinance in front of you, one, I want to give a big shout out to Assistant City Attorney Bree Drury, because she did a lot, most of it. But this one, brainly changing a lot of everything of what we've been trying to do from most city codes, from misdemeanors to infractions, because we're trying to leave misdemeanors mostly in state code. There are a few that we want to leave as misdemeanors, the larger ones. There is the big change is a lot of this noise ordinance relied on using a decibel meter that had some ANSI standard that we don't even have one. So we basically changed it to what other city code is it's something easy to measure, a distance. And most of it is, like, if you can hear the music, you can hear the noise 50 feet. So it's easily measurable for officers. And it also allows for someone to, if they do feel the noise is disturbing their peace, to be able to follow up on that, even though the old way, if it was below the decibel meter, they didn't have that option. This gives them the option. So it gives the officers and the citizens more discretion. And lastly, it replaces a lot of antiquated language. There's like the noise ordinance basically says, like, I'm sure there's some people who have phonographs still. But I've never been to a noise complaint where that was the issue and like that wording is taken out. It just makes it more up to date on our language. Other than that, I believe you have a copy of that, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Captain Clone. Counselors?
Oh, Mr. Mayor?
Counselor Towsley?
Vinyl is coming back, you know.
I have heard that. That's why I don't think we get any complaints on those that I know of those, sir.
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
I was gonna say, I'm like, what about the people that like to use the old and that don't want to upgrade to the new? But if there's not an issue and you haven't heard it being loud enough that it's causing an issue, then I can understand why you went that way.
Counselor Spiegelmeier?
Thank you, Mayor. So Captain, I was just curious, not a deal breaker, why the time changes? They shifted that window from from 7 to 7 a.m., then it went from 9 to,
That was all for consistency. That was the problem with this code, or this ordinance, and then the other ones is they were kind of all over the place. Some were 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., some were 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., some were this decibel meters, this was this. So everything we've been working on for probably the last at least 2-3 years, probably more, is just getting consistency within city code, whether it be fines, whether it be times. And 9 p.m. seems to be kind of I don't want to say the average, but the time where most people have gone to bed, things like that. 7 p.m. is a little early. And then 7 a.m. has always kind of been the standard for beginning in the morning. That way, especially in the summer, most construction crews and stuff want to get started early. So that was it's mainly for consistency.
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
the exhaust discharge into open air, is that like, maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but is that Like when the big trucks decide that they're gonna blow smoke in the back of their tailpipes, is that not the same scenario?
No, we took that out. That's where we have the redundancy of the state code where they have the excessive exhaust, things like that, versus city code where a lot of this dealt with like generators and things like that, that blow out that kind of thing. So it allows the city and the officers to deal with more noise and exhaust from bigger things, like I say, generators and bigger equipment, not vehicles, because that's handled by state code. Again, that way we don't have duplicative issues where one's an infraction, maybe one's a misdemeanor in state, and then depending on who gets written, they either pay a fine or now they got to go see a judge and risk jail. So
Okay, I see.
it's consistency again.
Right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. Councilors, you have ordinance 4845 before you. Councilor Schroeder.
I make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4845.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Schroeder, second by Councilor Horstman to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4845. Is there discussion or amendments? Councilor Lidkey.
Just a comment. Great job, Bree.
Is that it?
That's it, okay.
Sorry.
Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Clerk Rocky.
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4845, an ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending various sections in Article 1, Chapter 24 of the Lewiston City Code pertaining to general provisions, amending various sections in Article 2, Chapter 24 pertaining to noise control and regulation, repealing Section 24-39 titled Motor Vehicle Noise Performance Standards, repealing Section 24-40 titled Maximum Permissible Environmental Noise and Sound Levels, repealing Article 3, Chapter 24 titled Off-Road Vehicles, amending Section 24-52 pertaining to graffiti abatement, enacting Section 35-22 pertaining to compression or jake brakes, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Councilors, next up, we have ordinance number 4883, considering amending various sections in Lewiston City Code, Chapter 8, related to fines associated with animal violations, and various sections in Chapter 35 related to fines with traffic and parking violations. Again, this is an action item. We have Captain Clones with us. Captain, again, if you'd please introduce yourself for the record, the floor is yours.
Captain Jeff Clone, Lewiston Police Department, Mr. Mayor, City Council. This ordinance pretty much handles the one, again, it's about consistency. As you'll see, there's recommendations for some fine changes. There's some talk about when it would go into effect. We would normally, once it's approved, it kind of goes into effect right away. This one, in consultation again with Assistant City Council Bree Drury, we would recommend this, if approved, wait till January 1st because there's a lot of like new tickets that would need to be printed and a lot of some code changes and just moving things around. And it does deal with raising the fees for a parking ticket, and it removes a lot of duplicative services, and it removes us the ability, which I know City Attorney Kayla and I have talked a lot about, whether it was legal for the city to double a fine if someone did not pay their parking ticket, so that would remove that. So there's quite a few changes on this. A lot of it involves, again, getting rid of things that are duplicative with state code and making the fines consistent. When you read through this code, some will say it's a fine of this dollar amount. Some will say a fine up to $100. Well, who decides that? Like, is it a good day? I write you a $5 ticket and the next day not? Like, there was no consistency. The number we had been using a lot, or at least in the 17 years I've been here, was $45. And nobody knows where that $45 came from. It's just been there. So after doing some research and looking, our recommendation is to make the fines consistent. None of everything, if it's an infraction, other than the handicap parking, because that's covered by state code, would be $50 from here on out. So that's kind of what I have for you, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Captain Clone. Counselors? Counselor Forsman?
With so I see the dogs get out and then the fine. Do we have and maybe I'm misreading it, but do we have like kind of a 1-2 exception where our dog accidentally got out and they didn't, mean for it to happen, and then they got told and then it keeps happening, then they get a fine? Or is it like your dog got out one time?
It would allow for that. If the dog's out, you could issue a citation. Our standard practice is we give a warning. Dogs get out, we get that. The issue becomes when we begin to know when the dog is called in and we're like, oh, that's so-and-so's dog, because we've been there that often. That's where citations can be issued. And that's why the recommendation for the $50, I don't feel that that is an excessive amount of money, but it's not so small that people don't want to pay $50. They might use that understanding that, okay, if I spend $50 and fix my fence, I don't pay $50. So it's a deterrent without being excessive. And that's the idea behind that.
Follow up.
Counselor Forsman?
Do you see any reason why it would not be valuable to add at least in the code that after like one verbal warning, then you would, just to have it as like in the code, so it's not like a unwritten but written rule kind of thing?
The probably the most difficult part of that, one, we don't have that for anything else. Well, I guess we do. Now I think about it, is when the city created the no smoking in city parks, there has to be like a written warning, but I've never seen a written warning. Like, we don't have one. So creating that, I guess I could see two issues. Is one, if it's not necessarily a bad idea, that's kind of a standard practice already. But if the owner just says he's just not going to deal with it, I think this is a way to motivate him to do that. And like I say, it's very rare to do that. But the other problem is if somebody calls in that dog is loose and we go to the location and let's say it went back in its yard before we get there, should that count against them if we didn't see it? Or do we take the neighbor's word? And if you have neighbors who don't like each other, I could call in and say their dog was out. So I think it creates a lot of potential issues that aren't really there. I think we do a really good job of giving the warnings. To put it in code kind of really makes it more difficult for the officers, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. The comments? Counselor Schroeder?
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4883.
Second.
It's been moved by Counselor Schroeder, second by Counselor Forsman, to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4883. Is there further discussion or amendments?
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
just a comment. Appreciate all the hard work. I know that, just reading the code is exhausting. So I can't imagine writing it and making sure everything is in there and laid out well. And so I commend all that involved in making sure that we have this and writing for our citizens and for all involved.
Thank you.
Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Clerk Brockie?
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4883, an ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending various sections in Chapter 8 of the Lewiston City Code related to fines associated with animal violations, amending various sections in Chapter 35 related to fines and penalties associated with traffic and parking violations, enacting Section 35-23 related to debris and handicapped parking spaces, enacting Section 35-24 related to infraction penalties under Article 1, enacting Section 35-54 related to infraction penalties under Article 3, repealing Section 35-169 related to walking on the left-hand side of a roadway when no sidewalk is present, enacting Section 35-170 related to infraction penalties under Article 8, and providing an effective date.
Captain Clone, I didn't want to ask you who let the dogs out for fear you might start breakdancing or something.
You do not want that. Promise you that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item C, Councilors, Ordinance 4887, considering amending definitions in sections 26-40 and 31-2 of the Lewiston City Code, amending section 31-33 to require property owners to keep sidewalks abutting their property free and clear of encroachments from trees and shrubs, and amending various sections in Article 2 of Chapter 35.5 related to the encroachment abatement of trees and shrubs in public right-of-ways. We have Director Johnson with us here tonight. Director, you know the routine. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director. In front of you tonight for your consideration is Ordinance 4887. So to give a little bit of background, the sidewalk in front of the property owner, whether it's on front yard or side yard, the abutting sidewalk is the responsibility of the property owner to maintain. That's one issue that it is typically within the right of way, but according to city code and common practice, the sidewalk is the responsibility of the property owner to maintain. So that includes snow removal, obstructions, vegetation. Very typically, staff, and this has been something that the mayor has taken on since he's been in office, we have struggled with working with property owners in our own right of way and finding ways to mitigate much of the vegetation weed issues within the city. What staff has struggled with, and to go back one step even further, is your property taxes go towards the maintenance of the right of way. And so this is not an issue of the city deferring the maintenance to the property owner. We have a maintenance crew that goes out and maintains, the canopy that grows like Main Street over the top. We have crews that go out and maintain that. We have crews that go out there and maintain Bryden Canyon. In the areas of the traveled way and the safety aspect, we do the maintenance on that. What we're talking about here is obstructions that are the responsibility of the property owner. And so, it could be the details within this covers mostly vegetation. So we're talking about either a dead or damaged tree that could be a hazard to the traveling public. The most common obstruction that we see is vegetation growing within what we call the street vision triangle. So as you come up to a four-way stop, or a two-way stop is a better example. So cross traffic and trying to look down both ways, and the property owners on one side or both sides have let their hedge, their tree, their weeds, whatever, grow within that street vision triangle. We can usually do our best to go in there and get what we can within the right of way, but oftentimes this is a much bigger issue. It's vegetation that grows within the private property into the vegetation, and as we all know, it may go away for this year, but it's an ongoing issue. And so under the direction from the mayor and the Public Works Director, we went and worked with legal staff. So now we're switching attorneys. We're going to Jennifer Tagano, who helped us with this one, and kind of rewording some of the sections within the code. And that gives the staff a little bit more flexibility in how we address this. I'm not going to go into the specifics exactly because I don't really know the details. And so Jennifer would be a good person to speak to public nuisances and levy of special assessments, but those are the avenues that we would pursue that would give us a little bit more flexibility. Instead of having staff go out there, we can work with the property owner to get those mitigated. So with that, I or Jennifer will be here for questions.
Thank you, Director. Councilor Spickelmeyer?
So Director, on this, would the new community resource officer be the one that would issue these? Or would the public works person?
No, and correct me if I'm wrong, that would be, a citation would be issued by the community resource officer, correct? Or am I?
This is Jennifer Tangano, Assistant City Attorney. So that's kind of the unique issue with these encroachments in the right-of-ways. It's a little bit of a dual role between public works and code enforcement, and with the creation of the the moving of the code enforcement officer to community development, I haven't been involved in those particular discussions. That might be Bree, but the goal is to streamline it a little bit so that public works can address it. And if it gets to the point where it becomes a code and an enforcement issue, they could take that route, but the goal is to allow the city to abate the nuisance before it gets to that problem, and allow for the city to, as long as it's within the right of way, just take the action and go there and, trim the trees or remove them if possible. But once it gets onto the private property, then we have to look at more legal enforcement actions as far as civil procedures for abating nuisances, or the essentially the criminal side of non-compliance with city code.
Councilor Speckmeyer?
Add one more. So if you have the only sidewalk within 5 blocks, I'm the only one that has to keep my trees trimmed?
By the code, the answer is yes. Typically, these are complaint driven. So, we will, kind of like Captain Clone was just explaining, we abide by what is in the code. But if you're out, in the south, East Orchards, and you're the only one with the sidewalk and nobody travels it, we're probably not getting a lot of complaints. But if you did, we would have to enforce the code.
Gotcha.
Councilor Forsman?
Mayor, it's probably going to be the same as what Colin said, but if there's someone that we run into that the reason they're not keeping up with it maybe is because of disability issues or age and they just can't get out there, how does that work?
Well, and that we do run into that quite often. When a lot of what we do is trying to work with the property owners, and that I can't even tell you how many stories. If it's a dead tree or there's so much stuff that we can do within their stuff that we can't do. This allows us. I mean, this puts a special assessment on their property, so they don't. It's not necessarily money out of their pocket, but more to the property.
Okay, thank you.
Councilors, you have the ordinance before you.
4887. Mayor,
Councilor Forsman?
motion to approve the first reading of an ordinance number 4887.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Forsman, second by Councilor Licky to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4887. Is there further discussion or amendments? Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Clerk Brockie?
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4887, an ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending definitions in sections 26-40 and 31-2 of the Lewiston City Code, amending section 31-33 to require property owners to keep sidewalks abutting their property free and clear of encroachments from trees and shrubs, amending various sections in Article 2 of Chapter 35.5 related to the encroachment and abatement of trees and shrubs in public rights-of-way, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Councilors, next up, we have ordinance number 4899, considering amending various sections in Chapter 2 of the Lewiston City Code pertaining to the creation, membership, and powers and duties of the Development Impact Advisory Committee. This is an action item. Director Johnson?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director. In front of you tonight is ordinance 4899. So we spent a good portion of tonight talking about development, good development and bad development. One requirement, and it's a very common requirement, is for developers to identify for large developments in areas of underdeveloped infrastructure. Specifically, we're talking about traffic, transportation networks, is to do an analysis of what their impact would be to that street network. And so the most common example, the tri-partnership, when they built the high school and partnered with some of the other developers in that area, they did an analysis, an engineering analysis that's been adopted by council, and said each trip creates such and such impact on, creates a defined impact on the network, the transportation network. And so you equate that to a lot. And so as somebody starts developing a lot and they're part of that study, they've agreed when they come to do a subdivision, just like this exact subdivision would have been identified within this area, and each lot would have paid a transportation, what do they call it? Make sure I got my verbiage right, but they would pay a development fee for the development of those lots based off the impact to the transportation network. And the reason that is if you plop these subdivisions out where they're at, and there is no, development precursor to that. Case in point, we talked about Brighton. All of these arterials need improvements to handle that traffic as these lots start to develop. So all of that to give you a background, the way the code has functioned and development has functioned up to this point is a developer, Dan Young is one that has come in and amends these current studies. So we're still amending the tri-partnership study that was done with the high school up there. What's far more compatible with development as a whole city is to come up with a development impact fee advisory committee. So you're looking at it as a whole, as a city. So that's what essentially, it's a very simple ordinance, is creating this development impact fee advisory committee where volunteers from the citizens, from the city would come in and serve. It's somewhat similar as our Public Works Advisory Committee, but this is specific to just transportation, cost of development and cost of investment in the infrastructure, and it evaluates, if the city spent X amount of dollars, or not just the city, but developers, there was X amount of dollars spent on infrastructure upgrades. We're still seeing delayed, levels of service on these streets and these intersections. We feel it would be comparable that we raise the rates or we lower the rates. However, that's for an independent citizens group to decide. It's not up for the city or the public works director to say we want more or we want less. It's an individual citizens volunteer group. So that is required by state law. So we've gone through, again, our attorneys have gone through the state law that dictates the formation of this group. This is a really simple ordinance in front of you tonight. It's, I think, one page that basically says this is what we're creating. Once it's created, they'll create their bylaws and follow everything that's outlined in state law. But tonight it's just the creation of the ability to create this group. So with that, I'm Dan for questions.
Thank you, Director. Councilors? Councilor Schroeder?
I make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4899.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Councilor Towsley to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4899. Is there discussion, amendments? Councilor Spickmeyer?
I did have a question. So would this have a staffing impact at all?
That's a good question. We do have our admin staff. We're playing hot potato. We do have to staff this, and we're already, as far as the engineering component, we have a development engineer who's already doing this. So it wouldn't be an additional impact on like our engineering technical side. It would just create another burden for our admin to, take minutes, staff the meetings, get the packets out to the group and schedule everything. So that would be one impact on it.
Council, further discussion? Okay, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Clerk Brockie?
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4899, an ordinance of the city of Lewiston amending various sections in chapter 2 of the Lewiston City Code pertaining to the creation, membership, and powers and duties of the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Councilors, next up, we have item E, ordinance number 4898, considering amending section 31-75-1 of the Lewiston City Code related to encroachment permits and the associated fee. This is an action item. Director Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director, in front of you tonight for ordinance 4898. The city allows for what we call an encroachment permit program. So if you wanted to build a fence, a retaining wall, sculpture, something that would have benefit to the public, you can apply for an encroachment permit. And that's if it's within the right-of-way. So we learned a lot about right-of-way tonight. A lot of times right-of-way isn't perfected. So what we call imperfected right-of-way is right-of-way that doesn't have streets, or maybe the street's not as narrow as the right-of-way goes out. So you want to build a retaining wall, or a fence is a better example. You want to build a fence out there. And so we allow you to encroach within the right-of-way. Staff reviews it, looks at the transportation master plan and says, yeah, you're not going to encumber any future road construction that's on our radar. although the encroachment permit does say you're responsible for the removal for whatever reason the city decides we need to put a road there, it is public right of way. All that to say, that's a program that's existed for many years and it's functioned very well within the city of Lewiston. In August, you adopted a fee or a rate for a review fee for that permit. I think it's $75. And we just went back and cleaned up the code because it doesn't say specifically that we can charge for that. So we're just doing a little housekeeping.
Mayor.
Councilor Schroeder,
Portman.
or Forsman.
It was my last.
I make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4898.
Second.
Councilor Schroeder, thank you. Been moved by Councilor Forsman, second by Councilor Schroeder to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4898. Is there further discussion or amendments? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Clerk Brockie?
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4898, an ordinance of the city of Lewiston amending section 31-75-1 of the Lewiston City Code related to encroachment permits and the associated fee and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Councilors, next up, we move to number 2. Under ordinances, first, second, and third readings. Item A, ordinance 4900, considering the first, second, and third readings of ordinance 4900 to amend section 42-1B of the Lewiston City Code to exclude from the definition of homeless shelter certain temporary warming facilities.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Towsley,
I'd like to make a motion to combine the first, second, and third readings and waive one reading in full of ordinance number 4900.
Second.
been moved by Councilor Towsley, second by Councilor Forsman to combine the first, second, and third readings and waive one reading in full of ordinance number 4900. Is there discussion? Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Opposed?
Nay.
One. Councilor Towsley,
I'd make a motion also to approve the first, second, and third readings of ordinance number 4900.
Second.
been moved by Councilor Towsley, seconded by Councilor Forsman to approve the first, second, and third readings of ordinance number 4900. Is there discussion? Councilor Kleber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I voted against this last year when this first came up. And the big problem that I have with it is we really kind of chuck city code on its ear by basically changing this and pulling these temporary warming facilities. They're not subject to the land use in the provisions of chapter 37. So what it means in essence is pretty much any property in the city of Lewiston is okay to have a homeless shelter on, a tent, if you will, as long as you got heat and you got some portable restrooms. And I don't really think that's what I really don't think that's what the citizens want. I know that there's a plan, and plans, always have good intentions. Of course, that plan didn't come together last year because they never got a tent. Who's to say if that piece of property is available again? Where are you going to put it? So I think it's way too broad, and I'll not support it.
Mayor?
Councilor Towsley?
Yeah, in the original ordinance, Mr. Kleber stated the same argument, and he's correct that that tent did not actually happen. But there were, as far as I know, any other temporary facilities that were set up in the city of Lewiston because of this ordinance that was put into place. What we are attempting to do now is to do this again. And if if someone feels this is giving this organization another chance to be able to do this. And at this point, which is now almost October, if we had a building that all of a sudden an owner said, I want to do this, we would still be 2 to 3 months out. You know that because of conditional use permits and everything else. That puts us into the new year. This is a Band-Aid, admittedly, but it's a very important one. And that's why I support it quite passionately.
Counselor Forsman?
I was one that was on that committee where we met with those that are passionate about our unhoused community. And we were late in the game, and so then they didn't have somewhere to go to stay, to get in warmth. And I can't imagine being out in the freezing cold and not having anywhere to go. And I would hate for that to happen again. This is a temporary, so it is not permanent. It will not be there forever. Could it be a better solution? Maybe, but if that's the case, then we need to start now looking to the future to have enough time so that we are providing adequate shelter for those that are in need and not causing them to freeze to death.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, I hear no further discussion. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. 4,900 roll call.
49. Says voice.
Oh, well, we could go with that.
It's a voice vote, Mayor.
It is? Oh, okay. I see.
For the motion to approve the readings is a voice vote. Adoption later on is a roll call.
Yes.
But thank you, Counselor. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Hey,
Motion carries. Clerk Brocky?
Approving the first, second, and third readings of ordinance 4900. An ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending section 42-1B of the Lewiston City Code to exclude from the definition of homeless shelter certain temporary warming facilities and providing an effective date and expiration date.
Thank you, Counselors. We move on to number 3, adoption approval of ordinance summary. Item A, ordinance 4900, considering adoption approval of the ordinance summary. This is an action item.
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Towsley?
thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 4900 and approve the related ordinance summary.
Second.
Been moved by Counselor Towsley, second by Counselor Forsman to approve, or to, pardon me, to adopt ordinance number 4900 and approve the related ordinance summary. Is there discussion? Clerk Brocky?
Council President Lidkey,
Aye.
Councilor Towsley,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Kleberg,
hey,
Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Aye.
Counselors, next up, we have Roman numeral 7, items moved from the consent agenda. You have now before you the preliminary plat Canyon Crest South Edition. And again, it was recommended by staff that final approval of this plat by the council should only be considered if the council has already made a conditional approval of the related Bryden Avenue vacation petition, which council did not pass earlier. So if it was your desire, you could make a motion to reject the Canyon Crest South Edition preliminary plat as presented. I need a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to remove the plat. I don't have the wording.
To reject the Canyon Crest South
Reject the
Edition
Canyon plat.
as presented.
Sorry.
I make a motion to reject the preliminary Let me go back to that.
Does that work?
Preliminary Canyon Crest South Edition and members direct staff to write. No, I don't have to say
Counselor
that.
Towesley, do you have a motion on the floor?
No, sorry, he gave it to me because he,
Yeah, I just have to find it again. I'm sorry, I apologize.
I can just make a motion to
I'd like to make a
deny.
motion to refuse the subdivision of approximately 9.4 acres of the preliminary plat for Canyon Crest South Edition. Will that work?
That works.
Okay, I had to find the word. Verbiage.
All right,
Verbiage.
it's been moved by Counselor Towesley, I think, second by Counselor Forsman.
Yeah, I tried to help on the initial.
Thank you.
Okay. To reject the Canyon Crest South Edition preliminary plat as presented. Are we close enough on that? Okay. Fair discussion?
Fair.
Counselor Forsman?
I just want to thank all the staff that come here and stay late. I know I have to stay late, still wake up in the morning for my other day job, and it can get rough. And you guys are always here and making sure especially our attorneys, making sure we're staying on task. So I appreciate all the hard work with all of our staff. It's hard work out there, and I know that it doesn't always feel like you're appreciated, but you are, and I just want to make sure I shared that, so.
Counselor Towesley, you have the right to close debate, being the motion maker, if you so choose. If not, I will ask Clerk Rocky.
I've already said plenty tonight.
Okay, Clerk Rocky, please.
Council President Lidkey,
Aye.
Councilor Towesley,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Kleber,
Aye.
Councilor Spiegelmeier.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, councilors. Next, we move to Roman numeral 8, unfinished and new business. Item A, City Councilor comments. Comments shall not be related to an item currently before the City Council or an item that may come before the City Council in the foreseeable future and shall be limited to comments, not discussion. Councilor Lidkey?
I just want to say that I have received multiple messages, email and voicemail, other avenues, commending several staff of the city for their follow-up. The last one was Director Johnson, and very kind words were said. I can't speak to the actual project because it will come before council. But it's been a nice change, even though we still get those other emails. Just know that your work is being noticed by not just us, but our citizens. So good job and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Counselor. Other council comments? No? Okay. I'm going to keep moving through this. Next item B, City Boards and Commission Liaison Updates. Done tonight. Okay, Mayor comments. I would like to just make a comment or two here. It was brought up during the discussion on the FOP contract, but just within that contract, it does call out the duration of the contract and says agreements and/or memorandums of understanding made outside of the negotiations period shall be reassessed upon the next negotiation period. So I would take that as an invitation that if we think there might be some room for improvement or suggestions we can make for the next go-around, that we have those discussions with the different collective bargaining groups and we talk about things like automatic COLAs and things like that. So I don't think the door is closed on that, and I'm certainly welcome to help in those discussions. I too have received some very favorable comments about staff, so thank you. That's wonderful to receive those. Next up, we have item D, Advisory Board and Commission appointments. I don't think we have any tonight. 7E is agenda topics. Nothing going there, okay. Roman numeral 9, adjournment.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Lickey, second by, was it Forstman or Schroeder? Counselor Schroeder, I'm just not hearing well, I apologize. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, we are adjourned.